But my next guest isn't worried about that. He says Nvidia's core business is on fire and the stock will rally from here. Gene Munster is managing partner at Deepwater Asset Management. Gene, I don't know if you just heard that report from Christina as well about sort of the government looking to do more Chinese export restrictions for the chip design firms. But there clearly is a plan here to restrict China business. And we heard from Wang himself last night kind of reiterating why he thinks American companies should play a role over there.
Yeah, Kelly, that was the subcontext to yesterday's call, was this narrative that Jensen had. He was almost selling to investors about why the White House should be more favorable to Nvidia and why he's doing a great job of trying to navigate that. And he really centered it on two pieces. The first is related to how they're bringing more core manufacturing, advanced manufacturing back to the U.S., of course, working with partners like TSM to do just that. And that's really critical for the White House because Trump has this belief that in the future that we need to have that critical tech built in the U.S., that we can't rely on our allies as much. And of course, much of that comes from China. And so that was one piece. And the second, he had this comment about trusting the president and that he has a vision and a plan, and I believe in it, and I trust that. And so when I think about the conversation that you had with Christina before this about what's going on with kind of the software curbs getting put in and what it means for NVIDIA is ultimately is the White House is slow playing this. But keep in mind that what matters more than bringing chips back, keeping AI out of the hands of China, what matters more for the White House is the economy. And I'm basing that on a conversation I had on Friday with a high-level former U.S. trade official and really emphasized that the importance of the economy. So in that case, I actually believe that Jensen, reading between the lines, he actually sees on the horizon some sort of resolution where ultimately that whether it's with Synopsys or what's going on with NVIDIA, that these curbs can be kind of pulled back as a point of a negotiation piece for a broader trade deal. I mean, it would make a ton of sense. That would be a big win for China. And ultimately, they're going to probably get some of this tech in some form or the other, whether it's home built or from somebody else, and might as well have a U.S. company benefit from it. And so there's a lot there. I think that the punchline here is I'm optimistic that we're actually, despite the headlines seemingly getting worse around China, I actually think by year end, this is going to sort itself out.
Yeah, if you're right, this would be a huge tailwind for them because you said, you know, if not for the China curbs, their April revenue would have exceeded the street by 8%. They took about a 15% hit to overall revenue. So if you think this gets fixed, you add that back in, plus you have Middle East demand, plus you have, continued demand here in the U.S. It all sounds great, frankly. But is there a chance the Chinese are going to, look at this and say, look, even a 6 to 9 month period is plenty of time for us to continue to try to make headway with Huawei and others and kind of turn their attention towards investment there instead of in the U.S. companies like NVIDIA?
I mean, that's something that's clearly on the table. I just want to kind of test and push on the numbers there a little bit, is that if you look at where the street's at today, the changes to numbers broadly took the China H20 and kind of this low-end chip, whatever it might be, out of the numbers for the next 4 quarters. And so I think you have this opportunity where if, in fact, things do turn to the positive, that would be an unlock. And so I think the numbers have largely been de-risked. And there's this conversation about curbs in China. And I just want to put just the emphasis. You mentioned that 8% kind of upside to the estimates, the guidance relative for July, just so your viewers can get a sense about how big this was, is that over the past 3 quarters, they've raised guidance relative to where the street was at on average by 2%. And so we're talking about a major acceleration. I mentioned that in the context of the China conversation. What happens there is there's something much bigger happening here. And the much bigger thing is the AI build out is much earlier than what even I, who am optimistic about this, had anticipated. The hyperscalers are still only about a third of the way through. If you look at companies, industries, sovereign, that really hasn't even begun. And so I think regardless of what happens with all this trade in China, the reality is that if AI has the potential that I believe, we're going to be talking about strong growth rates for NVIDIA for the next few years, much longer than people anticipate.